Okay, so for Lab 4, we're going to be setting up 2 ESXi hosts. We just completed Lab 3. Notice that my domain controller is on, because we're going to need that for this lab. So we're going to go ahead and create a new virtual machine. The typical is fine for us. Make sure you navigate to wherever you keep the ISOs. For me, it's going to be on my C drive in a folder called ISOs, Vmware Visor. If you're not sure where the ISO for this is at, ask your instructor. But again, make sure you're loading the VMware Visor. It should be roughly about 340-ish megs. And yeah, once you mount it, it will actually tell you ESXi 5, and that's what we want. Make sure that you're naming the machine according to the naming standard that your lab is using. For me, I'm using 5A and 5B. Also make sure the location is the correct location. I have to put mine in C drive, VMs. Since we're going to be doing ESXi 1 and 2, I'm just going to create a folder called ESXi 1 and 2, and that's where I'm going to be storing them. Double check with your instructor just to make sure you're putting them in the correct location. Go ahead next. Pretty much we're using the defaults, except for this one, we want to make sure that we select it as a single disk. It just makes things easier for us. Go ahead next. And the basic hardware is going to be okay. We are going to edit our settings once the VM comes online. Like adding additional NICs and whatnot. However, my lab document says specifically to edit it now. So I'm going to go ahead and edit it. First thing that I notice is that it has 2 processors. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to 4. Memory, same thing, I'm going to bump that up to 4. And our network adapter, I'm going to go ahead and put that on our VMnet 8 NAT network. Our lab document will say NAT, but when it says NAT, it's assuming that we are putting that on VM Network 8 NAT, not just regular old NAT. So make sure you put it in the correct location. 4 gigs, 4 processors, and yeah, that should be exactly what we want. Go ahead and close, double check again, and we are ready to go. The actual installation shouldn't take too long. You'll notice that you might have 2 mice, so you actually want to click in the window just so that it goes a little quicker. It will load off the ESXi VM Visor ISO or disk, and it will go ahead and install our ESXi 5.5. You should detect your processors, however many processors you dedicated to it, and however much memory you dedicated to it. I did 4 processors, and I had 4 gigs of memory. Here you'll notice I have an i7 3820, and again I dedicated 4 gigs of memory. It might take a second or two to actually load depending on your hardware, so just gotta be patient. So that took a little while, so I went and paused it. So now the disk actually finished loading, so we're going to go through the initial setup phase. Go ahead and click on Enter to continue. Read through the license agreement, pretty straightforward. Hit F11 to accept and continue. It's going to scan all of the local devices and detect it. We only dedicated a single 40 gig hard drive for this, so that's what we see. So go ahead and hit Enter to continue off of that. In a production environment, what may end up happening is you may have like a RAID 1 or RAID 0 array, so you might want to set that up first. But because we're doing this all through Workstation, I needed a single hard drive, so bear that in mind. Go ahead and enter to continue when you're ready. Choose the keyboard layout that you want. I'm in the US, so the US default's fine. So here we're going to enter our root password. This is going to be the password that we manage this with, at least initially. So we're going to go ahead and do our default classroom password, which is password with a capital P and $sign. And if they do not match, you will get an error saying the passwords don't match. Here they verified both match. Hit enter to continue. It will scan the system again and gather additional information for the installation. And once it's totally done, it will confirm the installation. And so when you're ready, click on F11 to go ahead and complete the installation. The installation can take anywhere between a few minutes and 60 minutes, all depending on your hardware. So I'm going to pause it and I will pick up afterwards. Okay, so it took about 10 minutes on my computer. Once it was finished, it prompted me to reboot. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot. So that concludes the first portion of Lab 4. The second portion is all about configuring the management network. With the restart, it auto loads up and auto loads up our ESXi host. It does its initial run through. This run through can vary. Again, it all depends on the server hardware and the storage media that it's on. What's happening behind the scenes is it's actually loading the files from the hard drive into memory, because our ESXi host actually sits directly in memory. Doesn't really sit in our hardware. So it should be finished starting here in a second. What we're going to have to do is we're going to add in our IP address, our gateway. We're going to disable our IPv6 settings, name it, and then verify that it's working. Once we're done with that, we are going to end with creating 5 additional NICs. Because remember, this is what's going to be running our individual virtual machines. So now that it loaded, we're going to go ahead and hit F2 to log in. Our login name is root, and our password is our standard classroom password. From there, we're going to customize our view. We're going to configure our network management. We want to navigate down to IP configuration, because right now, notice it says automatic, which means it's on DHCP. We don't want that. We want to set a static address, so you arrow down, hit spacebar to make this the set. From there, you're going to arrow down to the IP address. The first host is going to be 21. Make sure it's the 255.255.0 subnet, and default gateway should be 192.168.246.2, and that should be good. We want to go down to our DNS configuration. Make sure that our DNS server is our domain controller, which is .19, and the host name is esxi1.vita.local, just like we set up our DNS names. We don't have a secondary DNS server, so we're leaving that blank. We're going to hit enter to accept the settings. And just for completeness sake, I'm going to look at the customized DNS suffix. And that's going to be our vita.local. Once we are done, go ahead and hit escape to exit. Do you want to apply and restart? Yes. Notice now the host name is ESXi1. The IP address is 192.168.246.21. It's a link local IPv6 address, so we're going to leave that one alone. But we want to navigate down to test. We want to make sure that this works. We want to test the gateway. We want to test our domain controller. And we want to make sure that we can resolve our esxi1.vita.local, our local host name, to the proper name. So when you're ready, go ahead and hit OK, or hit enter to accept them. And what should happen is it will ping each one of them. If they do not work, some troubleshooting steps will be make sure they are all on VMnet 8. Also, for the host name, make sure that you included the fully qualified domain name, esxi1.vita.local. Okay, so with that, we are going to back out again. We're going to go ahead and shut it down. So we're going to hit F12 to shut down. It will prompt us for our username to verify we're authorized to shut down. We are going to shut down because I want to do some configuration. Shutdown normally takes a minute or two, not terribly long. Okay, so once it's shut down, we're going to go ahead and select our ESXi 5A host. We're going to edit its settings, because right now it only has one NIC. In reality, when we do this on physical servers, we're going to do multiple pathways to different shares, or different data stores. Remember back from Lab 1, we actually have 4 separate networks. One network for management, one network for fault tolerance, one network for vMotion, and one network for our iSCSI. So we have to make sure that we add in all the appropriate NICs. We want to add in another NIC card. We're going to specify the second one, a second pathway to our data network. We're going to add in a third one. That third one is going to be our VM Network 1. We're going to add in a fourth one for VM Network 2, because 1 and 2 are going to be our vMotion and fault tolerance networks. We're going to add 2 additional networks, and they are going to be for our VM Network 3. These are going to be for our iSCSI data storage, because one of the problems with our ESXi is right now it's using that local hard drive. We don't want that. We actually want to have the data stores on an iSCSI SAN. That way we can add ESXi hosts on the fly and then just connect the data stores. Add one more, because we want 2 pathways to our iSCSI. So again, we're going to go and add network 3. So you should see there are 2 8. There are 2 3s, 1 1, and 1 2. And that is essentially the end of Lab 4. However, we only have one ESXi host. We want to duplicate the same settings for our second host. Also, make sure that you use the IP and name for the second host. Thank you.